The first purpose of the Second Amendment was to enable the people to meet unlawful force with like force. This is not a claim I make out of nowhere. Most people don't realize that the Second Amendment grows out of the French and Indian War. French and Indian War. How it started is not as important as how it went. All along the border between the French and British colonies, Indians were raiding the villages of the other side. I know some people want to say, oh no, it was just one side of it. No, both sides were doing it. Uh, the European colonists, British and French, would also retaliate to these attacks by massacring Indian villages on the other side of the border. All right, there's no good guys in this part of the story. They don't exist. There's an apocryphal story about a French merchant. See, scalping was an old European tradition that was proof of the kill. You took their scalp. You bring that scalp in, you hand it to the guy who pays out bounties. You know, this is an English scalp, this is a German scalp, it's an Italian scalp, it's a whatever, and you get a few extra pennies for that scalp. They brought it over and then passed it on to the Indians. You know, we'll give you 3 cents for French merchant. Obviously, they give you 3 cents for an English scalp. English merchant, we'll give you 3.5 cents for a French scalp, or a Huron, a Mohawk, an Iroquois, whoever scalp, right? Now, there's an apocryphal story from this time. A French merchant was particularly fond of a certain uh, British, English woman, but the war came. An Indian brought in her scalp, proving he had killed her, and demanded his payment. And this merchant had to pay the money with a broken heart, because now the woman that he wanted to marry so badly, well, she's dead. There's a few other stories from that time that I'm not going to repeat here because, well, they're pretty salty. I'll repeat them in a different under different circumstances. The point is that in this environment, the colonists had to defend themselves in their homes because there was no British army, there was no French army to defend them. They were too busy fighting what for these fortresses along the border uh, that gave them control of a given area. Meanwhile, the real army, right, 90% of it is in Europe. They're off fighting not the 100-Year War, but the next one in line. Anyway, yet another European war. I mean, that's kind of an answer in and of itself. They're off fighting yet another European war. That war ends after the French and Indian War winds down. Right? This fighting here, yeah, it's sporadic, but it's pretty much over now. The massacres have stopped for the most part. Um, William and King William in England realizes, hey, I got all this colony over here that I can protect. I should be protecting. I'm going to send an army over now, after the fact, after it's no longer useful. Now I'll send the army. The colonists were actually used to defending themselves and their homes and their families and their farms and their villages. This is the environment where the Second Amendment rose. The duty of every man to keep and bear arms, to defend his home, to defend his family, to defend himself, to defend his village. That's where this tradition came out of. Not out of fighting the British. I don't know why we keep saying this, right? Had nothing to do with fighting the British. The fighting the British was just an extension of what they were already doing. Now they're and now they're fighting the British. Okay, great. All right. But that's not where they started. And it had very little to do with anything at that point. It had everything to do with the continued fear of Indians on the front end, wild men. Now, wild men was a kind of a nebulous term. Euros who'd run off to live either with or amongst the Indians because they couldn't make it in society, whatever reason. And a lot of them were out there because they were criminals or debtors or something else. Where you coming back to Boston or Philadelphia or New York, Raleigh, uh, Charleston, wherever, wasn't going to happen. It just wasn't going to happen. These were the people that they feared so much. They weren't worried about the British coming back. They had a treaty. British are civilized. They're not going to come back, at least not anytime soon. 1812, but anyway, um, that's what they feared so much. The first purpose of the Second Amendment was to enable the people to defend them, to meet unlawful force with like force. And we really do need to get back to the actual roots and not the political talking points that we've been stuck on stupid with for the last 100-ish years. Right now, we're entering a very tumultuous time where unlawful force will be used rather liberally. Have announced their intentions. And no, most of them haven't said anything. Most of them are very smart, very quiet. Keep it to yourself. And then get a little 9mm and shoot a Trump supporter in the back of the head, or somebody they think is a Trump supporter. Right. But they have declared their intention to do this. Maybe they'll have a touch of courage and shoot him in the front. I don't know. The case out of Portland, Daniel, I forgot his last name. Um, I'm ashamed. I'll do push-ups later, but in the meantime, he that guy, that Antifa member, shot him in the back of the head as he's walking down the street, totally oblivious. Now we can't be totally oblivious because now we have a literal terrorist army living in the United States freely, no restraints, and they can't be deported because they came from this country. They were born here. Their parents were born here. Their grandparents were born here. Worse still is they have the self-radicalized, well, righteous indignation of thinking that they're the good guys. Or at least that's what they say out loud. I don't know what they really think. If they thought at all, they realized, they're not the good guys. That's not the point here. They say it to themselves because they want to believe it. And that is something that is fucking terrifying. They are acting with the idea in their head that they are the good guys. History will condone me. I'm going to be a martyr. Well, to everybody who actually isn't a Nazi, I gotta say, and by the way, on both sides, there are some people who voted for Kimmel, but they're looking at what's started to happen already and said, I'm not sure this is okay. This is not okay. If you don't believe me, go check out the walkaway movement. There's been as many people join walkaway since Monday when the teacher story came out, the school instructor story came out, as there had been in the previous 6 months. Violence is not the answer. Well, to some of you, it is. To some of you, it's the only answer you know. And that's okay. You're going to find that some of us are not going down quite so easily. Keep calm and mandatory carry on.